Okay, I'm just gonna start talking again. Three things I'm going to talk about are movement and physicality, queer morphologies, performance and collaboration. And just to kick off the first topic, um, the reason why I'm interested in line dances is because they combine a few things. One, puppetry as kinetic language. I'm just a big like puppet nerd, and I love that this can be another form of like dance vocabulary basically, and also the fact that puppetry can present or line dances specifically present us with like liminal beings that have that are culturally tied in with a folkloric and shamanistic practice basically that goes back thousands of years, and also that their performance as a transgressive act, that is performance as a way of transforming space. And I think something also that interests me about line dancing is this idea of biological motion perception, which is basically another fancy term for saying you can tell if something is alive, that our brains are like evolutionarily wired to sense human movement. And this actually is something that our brains do like from the moment that we're infants. And this study was actually done to define biological motion perception back in the 70s. And I'm going to show you a video that was kind of like a precursor to motion capture, right here. This is by a scientist named Gunnar Johansson, who began studying human motion. So can you guys see this video? Can you see the video now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I guess I think when I do full screen in Keynote, it gets unhappy. But so again, since there's no audio, basically this is just a sample of tests they did in the 70s where they, had performers do really simple motion with simple dots, connect on the joints of the performers. I mean, this is something that we're familiar seeing now as motion capture is a really pervasive technique. But back in the day, I think it's just an example of how with very limited information, our brains can actually, triangulate this motion and, infer body language. They can infer, cultural signifiers of the way, body language is, we interpret body language and social cues, but, I think they found something like children, under the age of like 5 had trouble identifying certain behaviors, but children also had no problem identifying quadrupeds like dogs. And they think that's just because kids are really low to the ground. But like, it's just really funny that, I don't know, I think that this is something that we take for granted, but I do think that for those of us working, in digital media and working with animation, our brains are trained to detect human motion, and that's something to be taken advantage of. I'm going to show you this other video. This is a puppetry group called Moominshans. But what I love about this troupe is that a lot of their puppetry involves non-representational or non-anthropomorphized characters. And the way that they are able to tell an entire story, with these completely non-representational objects, I think is really inspiring. Again, I'm sorry there's no audio here, but I think this is what, again, I think tying it back to line dancing, I love that there's, these aren't trying to represent anything. They're simply, they kind of break the fourth wall, and there's no, I don't know. I just love that the way that Moominshans uses these new materials to tell a story, using simply movement, and that was kind of an inspiration, I think, behind some of my early work. This is an early music video I did ages ago, but I created these jellyfish using a hybrid technique of marionettes and compositing CG jelly caps on top. But I think that there is something that interested me in doing like again non-anthropomorphized puppets, and combining techniques, because again I think I just think that our brains pick up cues that there's like something real about this. You know, we can tell when practical puppetry is involved, and instead of a purely CG process. And this kind of led to one of my first short films that I made in 2012, called Solipsist. And this was, I made this piece, you know, after about 4 or 5 years of working as a commercial and music video director, actually. I went to art school, I studied drawing and painting, and then I made a short film when I was in college because I thought I wanted to work in the effects industry. And when that piece, you know, that piece basically kickstarted my career. And I think I looked up to directors like Chris Cunningham and Spike Jonze, and I was thinking about like, oh, well, maybe I could direct music videos and commercials to kind of break into film. But I think as I did it for about 4 or 5 years, I realized that, you know, it was good to get experience, but that I wasn't really making what I wanted to say. And so this film was kind of my first chance at really diving in and, you know, kind of infusing it with everything that I loved. And, you know, combining, you know, hybrid techniques of performance, puppetry, and dance. Here's behind the scenes of some experiments we were doing in a, you know, how I started kind of playing with underwater puppets, removing the rods, filming them on green screen, and then using them to create like an entire world in After Effects. And you know, again, these are kind of like little mini underwater Chinese lions. And then I kind of, when I released this film, this is the piece that Björk saw, and I kind of brought these techniques to our first music video collaboration, Mutual Core, which we shot also at the end of 2012. And you know, again, the song that we were doing was about tectonic plates and making the analogy between geological friction and relationships. And so I thought I would kind of bring kind of an animist quality to these rocks, animating the strata kind of licking each other. So this is a test I did in my apartment.
Yeah, perfect. We can see.
Okay. So you can see it, but you just can't hear it, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And do you see like my slide tab on the left?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay. Sorry, it's not as pretty.
It's okay. We can block everything out.
You can look at my slides. But yeah, I mean, this project was so intense. We shot it in Iceland. I think at this point I was also still learning myself how to expand my work and how to work with a larger team. I mean, I think I'd done commercials where we had larger teams, but music videos, our budgets are always so, you know, shriveled, and I was trying to do this on an indie budget, and it was, yeah, it was just like really difficult. I mean, really worth it. I was so, I'm such a Björk fan growing up, and I was just really keenly aware of her legacy and felt a lot of pressure to live up to that. And so I kind of threw everything at it. But I think it was a lesson in, you know, how to work on a larger level, and definitely made some mistakes, you know, that I took with me as I kind of continued. But so this was a really pivotal project for me. I'm gonna talk a little bit more about queer morphologies, which I kind of term as like inhabited forms, avatars, personas that expand the embodied imagination. I don't think this is something that I intentionally sought out when I started working, but I do think that my interest in maybe like creating non-representational sculptures and puppets was kind of an interest in like, I don't know, like how to create digital or like fabricated bodies that didn't feel gendered or felt something, I don't know. I think I was just, it's one of those things where as an artist you kind of make things and you don't really know why, but you start to kind of pick out a pattern over time. And so, you know, this was a few years later. I'm not entirely going chronologically, but I think like after doing that piece with Bjork, I did a couple other videos for Tom York and Sigaros, and I was kind of, you know, I think that I was interested in expanding the language of the textures I was into and the materials, and I think also not being able to fabricate some of these for real because I didn't have a studio. Working digitally was just the most efficient way for me to work and to get out the ideas. But I was really inspired actually. I was actually living in London, and I loved going to the British Museum. And I remember looking at the samurai armor collection and also like seeing I don't know, just like seeing how they would like do lacquer engraving or like pearl inlay in some of the armor. And so I was just like really interested in like you know, this cross between like hybrid objects and ornamentation, and like these objects are actually photogrammetric scans I did of like I have a skull collection at home, and so I scanned those, and this is actually a camel's jawbone. But you know, I wanted them to feel kind of beautiful and immaculate, but you know, kind of animal-like at the same time. And eventually, you know, I started kind of expanding to doing, you know, more figures. And I guess they kind of almost became like a form of digital drag. Again, not fully consciously, it just kind of came out that way. Um, and so I think when we talk about, you know, digital avatars and, you know, queer bodies, I think that I found this amazing quote from this theorist and philosopher Donna Haraway, who some of you may know. She wrote a cyborg manifesto back in 1984. I'm going to read just this excerpt. By the late 20th century, our time, a mythic time, we are all chimeras, theorized and fabricated hybrids of machine and organism. In short, we are cyborgs. The cyborg is a creature in a post-gender world. The cyborg appears in myth precisely where the boundary between human and animal is transgressed. The second linky distinction between animal, human, organism, and machine. The cyborg myth is about transgressed boundaries, potent fusions, and dangerous possibilities. A cyborg world might be about lived social and bodily realities in which people are not afraid of their joint kinship with animals and machines, not afraid of permanently partial identities and contradictory standpoints. I think it's amazing that she wrote this, you know, nearly 40 years ago, and it feels so relevant today to where we are and our relationship to our bodies and the state of the world. And I think that, you know, during this time, I kind of was taking my avatars and trying to put them into a sort of narrative. This is a large-scale print I did, printed on silver metallic chrome paper. And I was really interested in like some of the like Buddhist landscape paintings where, you know, you would see people on pilgrimages and stuff. And so I think that there was always maybe kind of a, I don't know, I hesitate to use the word religious, but like spiritual kind of narrative that I wanted to communicate. And so I began also incorporating motion capture with these avatars. This is an early test that I was doing, but I kind of wanted to create like a digital divine comedy, you know, where we had the different strata of like spiritual purgatories, and you know, these avatars were kind of the inhabitants. these are some other motion capture tests I did. I worked with a local choreographer named Nina McNeely, who did amazing work with these performers. And I was just interested in the idea of like doing choreography that was evocative of certain human behaviors, and really making sure that each level of this world was kind of defined by those human behaviors, because I feel like that is reflective of how we inhabit online. I was really interested in like at the time of like internet infrastructure and how that informs like internet communities. I recommend a book called Networks of New York by Ingrid Burrington. Ingrid Burrington is an amazing artist, writer, journalist, who actually wrote this book as a way of like demystifying what internet infrastructure looks like literally the cabling that runs beneath our feet. And she often writes a lot about how technology and magic are kind of indistinguishable from each other. I'm going to play this little behind the scenes of this project, which I called Flesh Nest, and it was something that I again turned into like a Dante's Inferno kind of digital hell with 9 levels, and it's like both a short film and like a 9-part projection installation that I was eventually able to put up at a digital arts festival called Chromatic Festival in Montreal, which I highly recommend you all check out. And I think this is also the first like project where I tried to, I think I was getting a bit tired of effects and tired of how much work that we do in effects to make things that are convincing, and instead use the aesthetics of effects as part of the piece. I think the actual interface of 3D software is really beautiful itself, and I thought it could become part of this world. And also, like, a lot of these characters were never rendered. They're all kind of OpenGL play blasts of the work, and I just kind of did these rough previews of them rather than rendered them, with shading and lighting and all that. I think I wanted it to be part of the aesthetic of the piece. And something we also did is, we built these kind of oozing stalagmite sets, and with cables and stuff wiring around them. And I ended up scanning the set and then using that scan as an extension of the world behind the actors. Again, creating like a hybrid virtual and real set. I'm going to talk a bit more about performance and collaboration, because I think that, I think for a lot of us who work digitally, I think many of us are introverts, and collaboration with artists, with performers, is not maybe first nature for some of us. But I think that, I think for me, I had to kind of find my angle on it. I think like, I didn't have a background in acting or anything. I think maybe secretly I kind of wanted to do theater, but I was always too shy, and also never really saw myself represented. So I just didn't really have a pathway for that. But working with dancers, though, was something that felt a lot more intuitive for me, because I think there's a certain discovery process, maybe working with dancers that was nonverbal, that I think was fun and exploratory. And I ended up working with these flex artists in Brooklyn. So these are members from the community over there, and we made this collaboration called Interstice. And again, I just wanted to create a world where they could bring their work, and I created this particular world for them to inhabit. And I think that this was maybe an early opportunity to maybe not focus so much on effects and manipulation of the footage, but just working with the performers for them to, bring their best work and for us to, find the work together in camera. This is also, work I did with Serpent with Feet. Josiah here, we actually shot in, I forget the name of this location, but I think that our goal here, we didn't have very much money, and we just knew that we wanted the performance and the location to do all the talking, and we actually wanted to shoot in the theater, but we weren't allowed in, so we actually shot in the lobby, which was frankly much more beautiful. And so, and just letting Josiah do his thing in the space was the video. And I think that I like, after doing so much effects heavy work, I go through periods where I just really don't want to be on the computer anymore. I just want to work with performers to get, just beautiful performances on camera, and letting that be the video. So I think that maybe I did kind of reach a saturation point where I just got tired of effects, and enjoyed the process of doing the prep work, and also that footage you just saw was something we rehearsed maybe 3 to 5 times before we shot. So I think rehearsal is really important when working with performers and giving them opportunities to try things, and to let failure lose its sting, so that they can feel that they can do whatever and try things between each take. This is a still from my work with Perfume Genius. Again, we did maybe 3 days worth of choreography before shooting the video. Same with my work with Kalila. So I think that working with performers has given me an appreciation for the front end of work when we go into production, because I think again, those of us who work digitally a lot, we're often really consumed with post processes and working with our footage after we've shot it. But I think performance is the reverse. We want to do all the work ahead of time so you can see all that work on camera. I'm going to talk about my longest collaboration, which has been with Bjork. After we did Mutual Core, a year later in 2013, she came back, and I think we both agreed that if we worked again together, we wanted to do something very different. And she was going through, a 13-year breakup with her partner, Matthew Barney, at that time. And she had this exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art coming up. And so she invited me to create work for that exhibition. And that kind of first started out as Black Lake, which was a really ambitious project for so many reasons. I'm going to show you a bit of the lead up to that. But, there was a lot at stake for this because it was a new commission from MoMA. And it just felt like a lot of pressure, frankly. Making art is risky. And, you would think that shooting someone in the Icelandic terrain would be pretty simple, but getting a whole crew out there to this really volcanic area was actually incredibly difficult and expensive. In fact, this area is currently erupting as I speak. I'm sure you may have seen in the news. There's a new volcano that formed literally right in front of this location. You can actually see photos of this ravine behind the new volcano. So it's an interesting coincidence. But this project was, I think, an opportunity to create kind of like an operatic heartbreak, nocturnal heartbreak piece, and we wanted to show it in a 360 dome in the museum. This is actually early renders we did of what this dome could look like in the museum, and the idea would be that the film would wrap around the audience, and so. I frankly learned that to do a 360 projection, it's insanely expensive. To build the structure would have been millions of dollars, and we did not have even a fraction of that. So we kind of dreamed big and eventually had to scale it down, which kind of explains the really expanded long aspect ratio of the film. We kind of had to shoot it without knowing exactly how we were going to fit it in this dome. So it was just maybe my first experience working with an institution like MoMA, and I think our ambitions were really big, and we just ultimately had to really simplify it. But I think the benefit of that experiment is that this instinct to go into a 360 realm eventually became the seed of what would become Bjork Digital. These were early like concept renders and sketches I did of like, what we were to do if we were to take her other songs from the album and make them into an immersive, interactive experience where we can really feel like we're with her. And that eventually became our first VR project, Stone Milker, which we shot with a DIY 360 GoPro rig that we there was no workflow for this at the time, so we were kind of patching it together as we went. And we shot this where Bjork had written the song next to this lighthouse. And so you might almost say it's a form of like, documentary, really. And I think this was a process for me of also like letting go, because I couldn't quite, again, this is just like a really intimate experience that it created where it's just the camera and Bjork. And when you wear the headset, it's just you and her. And so, there's something very naked about this process that was sort of cleansing as someone who normally does so much manipulation later. But then, I think that, again, there's this kind of simultaneous processes going on where we were doing that work, but also trying to create a language for the album. This is an early sketch I did of like what the album cover could be like, because we wanted to create this like a heartbreak totem of her, like being flayed from this experience. And so I knew that there should be like a sulfuric kind of palette to this, wanting it to feel geological. And this is kind of the avatar that we ended up making that formed the home base for the VR project, and eventually became like the album sleeve for the album. And you can see here, the landscape is actually something that we scanned while we were shooting Black Lake. We flew drones over the landscape and used that information to form these dense high-res models. So in a way, the live action video that we made initially was kind of like the death song. And from that project, we ended up with all these digital assets that kind of birthed everything else after it. So even though Black Lake was shot in this really traditional way, it was, the seed for all the virtual, heartbreak opera that we did afterwards. This is footage of one of those scans. And, we put this totem right in the center of that moss plain. This is a bit of a behind the scenes. We kind of made like a little short film telling the story of her kind of emerging from this grave. And that became kind of like a short, like 1 minute film. This is like a thread system we developed in Maya to show her like stitching her chest back together. Any questions so far? You guys still with me?
Yes, we had someone asking, what kind of equipment do you use to scan these environments?
I use a software called Agisoft PhotoScan, AGI Soft PhotoScan. But I know that there's some other free tools out there. I don't know what they're called. I used to use a free tool called, it used to be called 123D Catch. Autodesk might have like, they used to offer a free one, but I just saw Photoscan I found the best. And also, I mean, you can, as long as you know, have a digital camera, it could just be your phone. You could just take a bunch of images on your phone, and use the software to triangulate it. You don't need a fancy camera. It's also when you photograph things to be scanned, you generally want the object to be non-reflective, because if it's reflective, it'll confuse the calculation. So you want to shoot something in even lighting, and make sure that it has, you know, details that the computer can triangulate. So generally matte objects work better, even lighting, and you don't want the lighting to change between your images. So, you know, just general soft lighting that stays the same is kind of the best environment to shoot that object. You can do a test with, you know, something on a table. So the way you photograph it is very important. The last kind of chapter of this Bjork Digital process that we were involved in was to create, you know, after we made Stone Milker, it was clear that more interactive VR experiences were becoming more popular. So I knew that our next project should be done in the HTC Vive, and that there should be some volitional movement in the experience. And she had asked me to do the song Family, which was frankly one of my favorite songs from that album, because it's just the whole journey is told in that song. And I knew that by the end of the song, you know, I wanted Björk to appear kind of as this like light deity, this kind of like giant walking light spirit at the end. And so I did this rendering of her like walking across the terrain. Again, this is the same scan of the ravine from Black Lake, but you know, I gave it kind of an icy glass shader, and you can see like her hands kind of stitching her wound back together, and then that kind of propels this avatar of her to emerge from the threads, which are made out of light. So this is kind of imagery concept art that I made while pitching the work. You know, because we needed to raise a budget to make this. Is basically making a video game, and we got Red Bull Music at the time to sponsor it. But you know, I was kind of interested in like I don't know, there's so much spiritual imagery going on, and I love just how in like I don't know, certain like I don't know, I remember just seeing certain like biblical references where there are like these disembodied hands, you know, doing doing divine work. And so I kind of thought it would be cool to have these kind of disembodied hands kind of stitching her together, and for that stitching action to become the mechanic of the VR experience. This is just some more concept art. And the colors were very much inspired by medieval alchemy. You know, the kind of the color palette derived from this idea of you know, spiritual calcination and you know, emerging out of your demons to you know, become the most divine version of yourself. And I think that's kind of informed the red, yellow, and black palette. And these images also became the kind of poster artwork for the exhibition. And this avatar here, I think that I was also just aware that a lot of people would have the headsets to experience this. So I also uploaded these avatars to Sketchfab, which is a kind of public social media platform where you can upload your 3D model, so that people could at least tumble around Bjork. So I think that there was an aspect of this whole exhibition that had to be kind of multi-platform. Here's video of someone actually experiencing the game. And so we built the project in Unity, and Bjork Digital was just such a huge experiment. It's not like we planned for it to become a VR exhibition at the beginning. I think it was just maybe a combination of stumbling through it and then looking back and being like, oh, this is a whole evolutionary process, and maybe we can tell this rather than do like a video album. This we could communicate this really personal experience that Bjork had in a really intimate medium and showcase it around the world, rather than, I think that there's an emotional dimension to this too, because, having to perform your heartbreak story for a live audience all the time on tour is like really exhausting. And so, again, I think this was a form of like emotional digital documentation that became a better way to communicate this particular story. I'm going to end with my talk on Björk with the last piece we did called The Gate, which we did maybe about a year later. It was the first piece of her new album, Utopia. And frankly, I'm most proud of this piece as it was kind of a combination of everything we had done up to this point. And it was kind of a transition video from Volnicura to Utopia. This project came about, all Björk told me was that she wanted the video to be about two lovers, passing light to each other. And so I thought, okay, like, what is this new, I think we re-entered that process of like, what is the language of this new world? Volnicura was very Baroque and ornamental and romantic. But Utopia, the name of the album, it kind of says it all. Like, I think that maybe the climate at the time and just looking at the state of the world, I think that there was this mutual conviction that we both had that the thing we made next needed to speak to this idea of like, how do we build a better society? Obviously, utopia is kind of it's a loaded word that is often thrown around. But is it not yet? Is it something that we can still aim for? And what does that world look like? And so we were looking a lot at like, the futurist movement from the early 20th century, and like, what are the kind of shapes that what are the aesthetics of that time, and why did they exist, and what was going on in the world at that time as well. And I think that like design is an opportunity to imply a larger world that it was a way to kind of explore what this world would be. And I noticed that in a lot of Björk's work, there was not a single straight line in a lot of her aesthetics. And, if we're going to create an album about constructing a new world, there should be something architectural about this visual language. And so I was looking a lot at like seraphim wings and, these kind of biomechanical designs to create something that looked a bit more robotic, but also angelic and like transcendent at the same time. So that kind of informed these shapes, and it's called The Gate. And I wanted there to be a portal, like we go into her chest, and this is like the portal is kind of like this interdimensional Rubik's Cube that we kind of enter into this new world. And we were also working simultaneously with Alessandra Michele, from the creative director of Gucci, who is also designing the garment for the video at the same time. And so that kind of formed the avatar that we see as her lover in the video. And we were also looking a lot at like certain spiritual imagery, like chakras and like Kundalini energy diagrams. And I was thinking a lot about how, I think that there's a tendency for these things to become, fast food spiritualism. I think in a world where these spiritual ideas are kind of easily consumed. But, the truth is these ideas, these like Vedic ideas, were designed as a form of, a roadmap to like societal change and salvation. Like, these are practices that everyone are meant to do. Like, you have to take care of your body first in order to, affect society as a whole. And so I was thinking about how like kind of looking at this imagery as something that has a much larger social implication than just, I think some of the new age aesthetics that we typically see can be kind of commodified, and so I kind of just wanted to like reinvent that, and also kind of give it like a futuristic bent. Like these were kind of meant to almost look like drones. I kind of thought maybe that the head dress for the avatar could look something a bit like robotic like this. And this is kind of concept artwork for the opening of the film, where we kind of introduce like, this is the world, this is the future that this story takes place in. It's a world in which resources have dried up. It is the world of the Anthropocene, but can it be something that we can thrive in? I'm going to just show this behind the scenes, and again, there's no sound, but I'll just talk through it. I did this opening. We shot Björk on a green screen with a camera dolly pushing forward, and then we tracked it, and I used a combination of matte painting and also reused some of the sculptures from my Flesh Nest piece to form the terrain, and used Maya paint effects for the grass. And we also had a kind of programmed light LED system on set to kind of recreate some of the shimmer of the CG elements that you would see later. This is, we shot on a motion capture stage where they shot like Thor and a lot of like the Marvel movies. So there was like an optical motion capture system of a bunch of infrared cameras placed all around the set, so that when our dancer Leo here did his work, it was an optical motion track system, as opposed to like an accelerometer based system. Like that's basically where you have a bunch of magnets attached to your joints, and it's just computing the motion capture is computed simply from the velocity of what you're doing, as opposed to like triangulating optically an array of cameras. They're actually doing this now for like football games and sports, where they have an array of cameras to create like live replays on live TV, which I find totally insane. And these are all the designs we did in Houdini of what this portal could look like. And this is kind of what we ended up with. And we had to do a lot of cleanup here to, get Björk kind of making love to this avatar at the end of the video. But, the story is basically, we start out with them passing this prism, and then in the middle of the video is that prism kind of fracturing her, and all this different, versions of Björk kind of in this ballet, and then we end with Björk making love inside the prism. So I think with every video, I try to tell a story, that there's always a beginning, middle, and end. I'm gonna talk about my latest collaboration with Twigs. I think that I did Utopia in 2017, and then Twigs and I started talking in. I did the Serpent with Feet video actually after that, and then Twigs and I started talking in June of 2018, and at that time, Twigs had already been training to do pole work. She knew that she wanted that to be part of her video. But, I think our time was limited when we first met. I think we got right to it. I think she started sharing, very openly about what she had gone through for the past few years following the release of her last album. And I think we talked a lot about the trauma of immediate fame, and also, her fallout with Robert Pattinson, and her health complications, and just how that all kind of culminated into a form of burnout. And now she's been, kind of retraining to do this pole performance. And so I think my job, I felt, was to combine this performance with her personal narrative, and to tell it all within a symbolic language. Like, how can I combine these two things in a visual language that made sense as kind of a fairy tale to encapsulate where she was. And when I heard this song, it very much was, clearly a ballad and a confessional song. So I just felt that that was, where I started, was a place of confession and vulnerability. And I think getting to know Twigs and sitting with her in the rehearsals of her pole work in LA, like realizing that this was a story about, it is a story about striving to be everything and failing, and emerging from that. And so I did these sketches in my sketchbook of like what it could look like if we tell this fairy tale where she's, striving to be this perfect version of herself, which is kind of embodied by this creature, like this angel sphinx on the top. But like my idea was that, I mean, I think sometimes when I come up with a video, I try to create like a map, because I try to like create a visual map and then bring the dimension of time to reveal each part of that map. So like in this, we start out with like the mortal world where she is performing on stage for an unseen audience, and she ascends to like a heavenly dimension where she's trying to be this thing she can never attain. And then when she crashes through that, she crashes down to the bottom in this underworld where she's kind of put back together in this like womb. So that became the story. And when I make treatments for videos, I try to make sure that I create concept artwork that summarizes the video. And one of the best pieces of advice I ever got was, when you do artwork for a treatment or you put images, you want it to feel as if it was plucked from the final film. So, because you want to give, the people with money the vision of what this looks like, to really inspire them to join you on the project. And so this image I photoshopped, I took a photo of Twigs when she was doing her pole work in studio, and then collage the background. Like the background are the curtains. These curtains are actually like, those dragonfish that people keep as pets, where they have those like really billowing tails. Like I kind of Google searched that and made that the background. And the cyborg angel in the distance is a combination of a collage and a painting. This is just some other artwork I did for the pitch. And I knew that I wanted the Sphinx to have her face. Like I really liked the kind of dream logic where everyone in the world, every character in this world is some aspect of who Twigs is. This is a sketch that our production designer, Fiona Crombie, who she actually designed The Favorite by Yorgos Lanthimos. She's an amazing production designer. And so this is one of her sketches of what the 360 stage could look like, which, by the way, if any of you ever do like 360 sets, it is really expensive. Just creating something of this scale to wrap around an entire stage was the reason why we couldn't shoot it in London. We had to go to Kiev in the Ukraine to shoot it. And these were kind of early concept sketches I did of the Sphinx. And kind of decided early on that I wanted the palette to be copper and jade. It was through a conversation with Twigs' stylist, Matthew. I think we just thought it was a beautiful palette and gave it that romantic quality. This is more rendered concept artwork I did of the final creature, and did these, again, like a rough photogrammetry scan of twigs, and began kind of creating digital mock-ups of what that could look like. These are concept sketches of the clay, like the womb cave set at the end. Just trying to figure out how we create this kind of seamless, massive environment. And these are before and after storyboard comparisons. I go a little overboard on my storyboards. I didn't have to go this detailed, but I think when I do my storyboards, I like to communicate where the light is coming from and what the textures are. And so I try to communicate some of that. But these are kind of some of the before and after comparisons. So I don't know, this video, for some reason, I think because of how much was going on, I did storyboard the whole thing very carefully, and we did pretty much do a shot. And luckily it was a short song, so you know, we were able to be really precise. I think with longer songs, you have to leave some wiggle room, but it just became a very precision-oriented process. Like this is pre-visualization I did for the camera move, rotating through around the environment and then looking up the pole so we could reveal the angel above her. It was so difficult to get this move, and there are all sorts of things that you don't see in the video that we had to fight with. For instance, it turned out we raised the set like a few inches to make sure that we could fit a large circular track underneath it. But then we thought, oh, well, maybe we should do Steadicam instead. We tried to get one of the best Steadicam operators in the UK to fly over. He couldn't get his flight because it was too last minute, and because of flight restrictions regarding bringing equipment on the plane. And so then we had to use a smaller track. So actually and she's on a mirrored floor. So we actually had a track on a mirrored floor that we had to erase in every shot. And it was such a nightmare. It was like one of the most harrowing visual effects problems I've ever had. So there's a lot in the video you don't see that we did to make it look very clean. This is our cinematographer, Danny Abello, behind the scenes, and some beautiful behind the scenes photos taken by a photographer named Anaka, who's really wonderful. One thing you should know, if you ever work with dancers, you need to capture their best work at the beginning of the day. Like if they're going to be doing a lot of intense choreography, you have to shoot that first, because that's when they're trained and ready. Afterwards, they're just exhausted. And so Twigs, you know, doing pole work is so like intense. You know, we saved all of this blue screen technical work we did at the end, you know, because that pole work was something she'd been training for, you know, 6 months to do, and we needed to get it first thing in the day. So, you know, it's just something that to keep in mind for any of you planning shoots around anything involving dance. After we shot the video, I also continued to do like artwork to communicate to the visual effects team, you know, how all these elements should integrate. So, you know, I like to do a lot of draw overs over the footage we shot so that the visual effects team knows, you know, what we're aiming for and compositionally where everything should exist. Or like here, you know, what the material of the face should look like. So, you know, I think having studied drawing and painting in college, it was just really useful. It's just been really useful for my for my filmmaking as a communication tool. This communicates how the curtains kind of transform into the cave texture at the end. This is a matte painting I did of the cave, and these are drawers I do of the Sphinx model to kind of talk with the visual effects team of like, what textures we could try or what shapes, or what reference, here I kind of wanted the Sphinx to have this kind of greyhound like body, and wanted to have kind of an amber glass texture in the feathers. So I'm going to end by showing this behind the scenes, which maybe some of you have seen. Again, I'm sorry, there's no sound. The heels were definitely added sound we did later. We had a great sound designer do that, and this is just some of our rehearsal footage. So you can see all this rig work had to be erased later, which was really harrowing. You can see like that whole track on the mirrored floor. And, I always try to have some sort of physical prop. If they're doing blue screen work, it's really important to have something real for them to react to, because blue screen work is truly hard for performers. It's not fun to have to imagine everything all the time. So, and we did, real face tracking of Twig so that I could get her real eyes interwoven with the Sphinx creature. Again, didn't have to do that. I just think it adds a lot to feel that it's really her behind there, because CGIs always look a little dead. And this was also challenging to try and figure out, like, okay, what does this stretching digital ephemera look like? And I just also am so grateful that Twigs is just such a Olympian athlete. I mean, to do wire work and make it look really incredible and graceful is because she's a dancer by trade. Not every performer has that ability. The hand in the video is the hand of our cinematographer, Danny Abello, which we happen to just leave in the video because breaking the fourth wall once in a while is always a nice touch. And yeah, this is our strobe work. And yeah, we shot the mud pit last. It was cold and late, and we were over time, and everyone was tired. But we had to have people waiting in the middle of the mud pool to dress her, and it was not easy. But I think I don't know, it all worked out. And so yeah, that's the Twig video. Yeah, that pretty much takes me to the present. I'm working on my first feature film at the moment, and also talking to some new musicians about doing other projects. But that pretty much concludes my talk. I'm happy to take any questions you guys have.